They humiliated me at dinner. Then I bought their company. Tonight's story is written for the US market in the niche of revenge audio stories. My name is Claire Bennett, and for 3 years I believed the worst night of my life was the night my husband stood up at his family's dinner table and laughed at me. He did not shout. That would have been easier. He smiled, tapped his glass with a fork, and told everyone that I was lucky he had married someone so ordinary. His mother laughed first. His brother followed. Then the whole table joined in, the kind of polite laughter rich people use when they want cruelty to sound like manners. I sat there with my hands folded over a napkin I could not afford to stain, listening to the man I had built a life with turn me into a punchline. What none of them knew was that earlier that afternoon, a lawyer had called my old apartment. My estranged grandmother had died. She had left behind a company, 3 hotels, and a sealed letter with my name on it. By Monday morning, the family that mocked me would be asking for a meeting with their new landlord. The title of the story could have been simple. They humiliated me at dinner, then I bought their company. But living through it was not simple. It was slow. It was quiet. It was the kind of revenge that did not need a raised voice, because the truth had already signed the paperwork. At first, I wanted revenge to be loud. I wanted to walk into their office in a black suit, drop the documents on the table, and watch every smile disappear. But the letter changed that. My grandmother wrote that power is wasted when it is used only to humiliate the people who humiliated you. Real power is making them reveal themselves. So I waited. I went home that night and acted exactly the way they expected. Quiet, embarrassed, grateful for the smallest apology, even though no apology came. My husband Daniel told me not to be dramatic. He said his family had a rough sense of humor. He said I needed thicker skin. The next morning, I signed the inheritance papers. The hotel group was not glamorous from the outside. It had debt, old carpets, tired staff, and 3 properties that bigger companies wanted to swallow. But it also had contracts. One of those contracts was with Daniel's family business. They used our downtown ballroom for investor events, charity dinners, and private meetings they did not recorded in their own building. For 2 weeks, I learned everything. I met the staff, I listened to the accountants, I read every contract twice. Then I found the clause Daniel's father had missed. Their discounted rate depended on respectful conduct toward hotel employees and ownership representatives. Ownership representatives. The first employee who trusted me was a night auditor named Mason. He had worked at the downtown hotel for 9 years, long enough to know which guests tipped well and which guests smiled while stealing bathrobes. He was the kind of man everyone overlooked because he made the lobby feel calm. When I introduced myself as the new owner, he did not flatter me. He looked at my shoes, looked at my hands, and said, "You have never run a front desk during a wedding party." He was right. So I asked him to teach me. That first week, I learned how many little wounds a business can carry. A vendor who overcharged because the previous manager never checked invoices. A wealthy client who treated the staff like furniture. A banquet room with a leaking service door. A housekeeper who had been promised a raise and then told the promise was never written down. Daniel's family was only one problem. They were simply the loudest one. I started with the quiet repairs. The staff got their overdue raises. The vendor contracts were reviewed. The service door was fixed. We changed the old break room furniture and stocked the fridge with actual meals instead of vending machine leftovers. None of it looked dramatic from the outside, but every change tightened the spine of the place. People behave differently when they know the person in charge is finally watching. Mason told me that on Friday night while balancing the cash drawer. "Careful," he said. "When rich people lose the privilege of being ignored, they call it an attack." I thought he was joking. By Monday, Daniel's father had left 3 messages. Richard Hawthorne was not used to waiting. That was Daniel's father. Tall, silver-haired, expensive in the way some men make expensive look like a warning. He owned a chain of private clinics, a real estate portfolio, and half the charity boards in the city. He was the sort of man who never entered a room without measuring who mattered and who could be dismissed. For 3 years, he had dismissed me. When my assistant told him I could see him at 2:20 for 15 minutes, he arrived at 2:05 and stood in the lobby as if his impatience alone should move the clock. I watched from the mezzanine. He did not recognize me at first. He looked through me, then past me, then back at me when Mason said, "Miss Bennett will see you now." The flicker in his face was small. Not shock, calculation. We sat in my office, which still smelled faintly of dust and old paper. Richard did not ask about my grandmother. He did not congratulate me. He opened with the tone men use when they believe a woman has borrowed authority and will soon return it. "Claire," he said, "this misunderstanding can be handled gracefully." I folded my hands on the desk. "Which misunderstanding?" He smiled. "The contract review." "There is no misunderstanding. The discount was conditional. Your family violated the terms repeatedly." "Families joke," he said. "Clients abuse staff," I said. "Contracts respond." For the first time, his smile left before he did. Daniel came home that night with flowers. Not my favorite flowers. He had never known my favorite flowers. These were white roses wrapped in black paper, dramatic and expensive and completely untouched by thought. He placed them on the kitchen counter like an apology could be staged, then leaned against the marble and asked why I had not told him. I almost laughed. For years I had told him everything that mattered. I told him when his mother's comments hurt. I told him when his brother's jokes crossed the line. I told him I felt lonely sitting at a table full of people who treated me like a charity project. Each time, Daniel translated my pain into inconvenience. Now he wanted to know why I had kept one thing private. "You would have told them," I said. He looked offended because the truth had hit its mark. "They're my family. I was your wife." He said nothing for a moment. Then he did what Daniel always did when he felt the flutter shift under him. He reached for charm. He stepped closer, lowered his voice, and told me we could make this good for everyone. He said the hotels could use his father's connections. He said I did not have to carry everything alone. That was the first time I understood Daniel clearly. He did not want to stand beside me. He wanted to stand in front of me and introduce me to people who had already met my money. The next investor dinner was scheduled for Thursday. Richard had not canceled. That told me everything. Men like him did not retreat from a room they had dominated for years. He probably believed the contract dispute would stay private, that I would soften, that Daniel would persuade me, that money would bend toward money like it always had. I let the booking remain, but I changed the staff assignments myself. Mason would oversee the front desk. Elena, our banquet manager, would run the ballroom. 2 security officers would remain near the service hallway, not visible enough to provoke, close enough to respond. Every invoice would be clean. Every interaction would be documented. "You think they'll act up?" Elena asked. I looked at the guest list. Daniel's mother, Vivian, his brother, Grant, 2 clinic partners, a city councilman, 3 donors who liked their names engraved on plaques. It was not a dinner. It was a stage. "No," I said. "I think they'll perform." Elena smiled the way tired women smile when someone finally says the obvious. That evening, I wore a navy dress and a plain gold necklace. Nothing loud, nothing that looked like revenge. The staff saw me cross the lobby and straightened, not because they feared me, but because they understood the room was about to learn a new language. The language was boundaries. Vivian Hawthorne arrived like a weather system. She wore pearl earrings the size of small debts and a smile that could cut ribbon or skin, depending on the audience. When she saw me by the ballroom entrance, her eyes moved from my face to my necklace to the hotel manager standing beside me. "Claire," she said, "how brave of you to work tonight." There it was, the old rhythm, the soft insult wrapped in silk. I smiled. "I own the room tonight, Vivian. Working is optional." For one perfect second, she forgot to breathe. Grant laughed too loudly, trying to rescue her. Daniel touched my elbow as if the gesture still meant something. I stepped away before he could turn possession into comfort. The dinner began with quiet tension. Silverware tapped porcelain, glasses filled. Investors spoke about expansion plans and community impact. Richard gave a toast about family values, while Alina stood near the service door with a tablet in her hand, recording every extra charge he had once expected us to overlook. Then Vivian snapped her fingers at a server. It was a tiny sound, almost nothing. But some rooms change on tiny sounds. I watched the server freeze. I watched Daniel pretend not to see. I watched Richard continue speaking as if the people who carried plates did not exist. And then I stood up. "Before we continue," I said, "I need to clarify tonight's terms." Richard lowered his glass. "Claire, this is not the time." "It is exactly the time." The room went still, in that expensive way, the kind of silence people buy with social fear. No one wanted to look interested. Everyone was interested. I placed the revised contract summary beside Richard's plate. Elena distributed copies to the partners and donors. Each page listed the new full-rate pricing, the conduct clause, the unpaid service charges, and a note stating that future violations would result in immediate termination of venue access. Grant muttered something under his breath. I looked at him. "Would you like that included in the record?" He shut his mouth. Vivian's face had gone pale under her makeup. She glanced toward the donors, then toward the councilman, then at Richard. She understood faster than the men did. Women who survive on reputation know when reputation has entered the room carrying receipts. Richard asked for a private conversation. "No," I said. "The disrespect was public. The correction can be public too." Daniel whispered my name like a warning. This time, I did not turn toward him. The city councilman cleared his throat and pretended to read the document. The clinic partners did the same. I could see the math happening behind their eyes. They were not offended by Richard's behavior. They were offended by the possibility that his behavior might cost them access, discounts, and status. That was fine. I did not need their morality. I needed their incentives aligned with basic decency. Richard knew it too. "What do you want?" he asked. It was the first honest question he had asked me in 3 years. "A written apology to every staff member your family has mistreated here. Payment of all outstanding charges by Friday. Full rate terms going forward. And your agreement that any future event involving this hotel will follow the same conduct policy as every other client." Vivian laughed once. A sharp, unbelieving sound. "You cannot be serious." Mason, standing near the ballroom door, said quietly, "She is." I had not expected him to speak. Neither had they. Vivian turned on him. "And who are you?" "The night auditor you called invisible last Christmas." That was when the room finally understood this was not about one dinner. It was about a pattern. Daniel followed me into the hallway after the dinner collapsed into whispers. He looked angry, but beneath the anger was panic. Panic did not suit him. It made him look younger, almost boyish, like someone had taken away a toy he had always assumed was his. "You embarrassed my family," he said. "Your family did that on their own. You planned this." "I prepared for it." He stepped closer. "Claire, listen to me. My father can make things very difficult." That sentence settled between us like dust. I had spent years hoping Daniel would choose me in a room where his family made cruelty feel normal. Now, in the first hallway where I held real power, he chose threat before tenderness. "Thank you," I said. He blinked. "For what?" "For making the divorce easier." The word hit him harder than the contract had. Divorce. Not argument. Not separation. Not "let's talk tomorrow." Divorce. His mouth opened, then closed. For once, Daniel had no charming sentence ready. I walked away before he found one. The next morning, my phone began to glow with messages. Vivian sent one long paragraph about betrayal. Grant sent 2 words I deleted without reading twice. Richard's assistant requested a meeting. Daniel called 7 times. By noon, a local business reporter emailed to ask whether Bedded Hospitality was renegotiating several high-profile accounts. I did not answer any of them immediately. Instead, I went downstairs and worked the front desk with Mason for 3 hours. A guest from Ohio needed a room change because the air conditioner rattled. A bride cried because her florist was late. A delivery driver got stuck near the loading dock. Real problems. Human problems. Problems that did not care who my husband's father was. By the afternoon, Richard arrived without an appointment. This time he did not stand in the lobby like a king denied tribute. He waited near the front desk, watching me help the bride find backup centerpieces from storage. When I finally turned to him, his expression had changed. Not softened. Men like Richard did not soften quickly. But he had recognized something. I was not playing owner. I was becoming one. Richard brought a folder. Inside were the unpaid service charges, a cashier's check, and a draft apology so stiff it sounded like it had been written by a lawyer who had never apologized to anyone. I read it once, slid it back across the desk, and shook my head. No. His jaw tightened. It says everything required. It says nothing human. Claire. Ms. Bennett. The correction landed. He did not like it, which meant he heard it. I gave him one instruction. Each apology had to name the behavior, the person affected, and the change going forward. No passive language. No phrases like, if anyone was offended. No corporate fog. Richard stared at me for a long moment. You learned that from your grandmother? I thought of the letter in my desk drawer, the steady handwriting, the sentence I had reread every night since the inheritance. Never confuse obedience with peace. Some of it, I said. He nodded once, not in agreement, but in recognition that the negotiation was over. The revised apologies arrived the next morning. Daniel did not move out immediately. Men like Daniel need time to understand that a door has closed. He kept returning to our apartment with small offerings. Coffee, dinner reservations, a framed photo from our honeymoon. Each object arrived carrying the same message. Remember when you were easier? I remembered. I remembered eating alone while he worked late with people he never introduced me to. I remembered shrinking myself at family events so Vivian would not call me sensitive. I remembered Daniel squeezing my knee under tables, not to comfort me, but to tell me to stop reacting. The hardest part of leaving was not losing him. It was admitting how long I had participated in my own disappearance. When the divorce papers were drafted, Daniel cried. Real tears, I think. He said he loved me. Maybe he did. In the limited way some people love the version of you that never interrupts their convenience. I told him I believed him. Then I signed. The hotel changed faster than I did. Fresh paint brightened the lobby. New uniforms arrived. The downtown ballroom booked 2 weddings and a non-profit gala at full rate. Elena promoted 3 servers to captains. Mason finally accepted the operations role he had been doing unofficially for years. But my own change came in smaller moments. The first time I gave a presentation without apologizing before speaking. The first time a supplier tried to talk over me, and I let the silence stretch until he stopped. The first time I saw Vivian across a charity luncheon and did not feel my stomach tighten. She approached me near the coat check. No pearls that day. No crowd around her. She looked smaller without an audience. "You must be very proud," she said. I could have chosen cruelty. I had earned the right to a shock answer. But revenge had already given me what I needed. Not her humiliation. My freedom. "I am," I said. Then I walked away. 6 months after the dinner, Bennett Hospitality hosted the city's Small Business Awards. The ballroom looked nothing like it had on the night Richard's family learned my name. The carpets were new, the brass polished, the staff moving with the calm confidence of people who knew they mattered. On each table sat a card, thanking the employees by department. Not the donors, not the board, the employees. Richard attended with 2 clinic partners. He paid full rate. Daniel arrived alone. I saw him from across the room. For a moment, memory reached for me. The old version of myself would have wondered whether he regretted it, whether he missed me, whether he finally understood. The new version checked the lighting near the stage and asked Elena if the keynote speaker needed water. Daniel approached after dessert. He looked tired right. Daniel arrived alone. I saw him from across the room. For a moment, memory reached for me. The old version of myself would have wondered whether he regretted it, whether he missed me, whether he finally understood. The new version checked the lighting near the stage and asked Elena if the keynote speaker needed water. Daniel approached after dessert. He looked tired, handsome in the familiar way of a life I no longer wanted. "You did it," he said. I looked around the room. The staff, the guests, the company my grandmother had trusted me to rebuild. "No," I said. "We did." He knew I was not including him. People ask if revenge felt satisfying. The honest answer is yes, but not in the way I expected. The public moments were brief. The silence after I placed the contract on the table. Vivian's face when Mason spoke. Daniel's expression when I said divorce. Those moments were sharp, almost bright. But they faded. What lasted was quieter. A housekeeper sending me a photo of her son wearing a new winter coat after the raises went through. Mason texting at midnight because the audit balanced perfectly. Elena laughing in the ballroom kitchen with a tray of desserts in her hands. The first month our debt service dropped below projection. The first review that mentioned staff kindness by name. That was the revenge. Not making cruel people feel small. Building something they could no longer enter without permission. The first offer to buy the hotel came 9 months after I inherited it. It was generous on paper. A national hospitality group wanted the downtown property, the riverfront building, and the small airport hotel that everyone underestimated. Their letter used words like efficiency and consolidation and strategic future. I had learned enough by then to understand what those words meant when they arrived wearing a suit. They meant layoffs. They meant replacing people with systems and calling the loss progress. They meant taking the thing my grandmother had built through recessions, bad winters, broken boilers, and impossible loans, then smoothing it into another brand no one would remember. The old Claire would have been grateful that someone powerful wanted something she had. The new Claire asked for their staffing plan. The meeting lasted 20 minutes. At minute 12, the buyer's representative explained that certain roles were redundant. At minute 15, he referred to Mason as front desk labor. At minute 17, Elena closed her notebook. At minute 20, I thanked them for coming and declined. After they left, Mason stood by the lobby windows and said, "That was a lot of money." "Yes," I said. "You sure?" I looked at the staff moving through the lobby. The housekeeper who had just bought her son a coat. The banquet captain who knew how to calm a bride with one sentence. The night auditor who had taught me that a hotel is not a building. It is a promise repeated by tired people who still choose care. I am, I said. The decision became public faster than I expected. By Friday, the business reporter had the story. By Monday, Richard Hawthorne called it sentimental management at a charity lunch, loud enough for 3 donors to hear. By Tuesday, one of those donors moved his annual gala from Richard's Clinic Foundation to our ballroom. That was the thing about reputation. People think it is built through speeches. It is usually built through what others repeat when you are not in the room. Daniel heard about the declined offer too. He sent a message that said, "You could have been free." I stared at those words for a long time. Free. He still believed freedom was a number high enough to leave everything behind. Maybe for him it was. For me, freedom had become the ability to choose what money could not buy back once sold. Trust. Loyalty. A place where people knew they would not be discarded the moment a cleaner spreadsheet appeared. I did not reply to Daniel. Instead, I walked downstairs and helped Elena taste desserts for the donor gala. Lemon tart, chocolate mousse, a small almond cake with raspberry cream. Ordinary details. Beautiful details. The kind of details a free woman wants to care about. The donor gala became the night the city changed its mind about us. 300 guests arrived under cold rain. Coats steamed in the lobby. The ballroom glowed gold. A jazz trio played near the windows. For the first time since I had taken over, I stood at the top of the staircase and saw the hotel not as a rescue project, not as revenge, not as proof. I saw it as alive. Richard arrived late with Vivian. I had not invited them personally. The foundation had. Vivian wore emerald this time, no pearls. Richard scanned the room with the alertness of a man realizing that influence had moved without asking him for directions. Near the dessert table, Vivian stopped beside me. "You refused the sale?" she said. I did. "People are calling it brave." I waited for the insult that usually followed her compliments. It did not come. She looked toward the staff, then back at the ballroom. For a second, I saw not the woman who had mocked me, but a woman who had spent her own life surviving rooms where power belonged to someone else. "I would have taken the money," she said. "I know." Her mouth tightened, but her eyes did not harden. Maybe that is why it was never left to me. Then she walked away, and I understood that not every victory announces itself. Some simply remove an old expectation from the air. Near midnight, after the donors left and the last glasses were cleared, Daniel returned. He was not on the guest list. Mason intercepted him at the front desk before I came down. I almost told Mason to send him away, but something in me wanted the final conversation to have a clean edge. Daniel looked around the renovated lobby like a man visiting the house he might have lived in if he had chosen differently. "I heard about the offer," he said. "Everyone did." "You always wanted security." "I wanted respect." He nodded as if the difference had finally begun to matter. For a moment, I thought he might apologize. Not the shallow apology of a man trying to reopen a door, but the kind that names the harm and asks for nothing. He came close. I saw it. Then pride rose in him like a reflex. "My family made mistakes," he said. There it was. My family. Mistakes. Even at the end, he could not put himself in the sentence. I felt no anger. That surprised me. I felt the gentle sadness of watching someone remain exactly where you left them. "Good night, Daniel," I said. This time, he was the one who watched me walk away. The next morning, I added one more rule to the employee handbook. It was simple. No client, donor, investor, or family member of ownership would be allowed to demean staff without consequence. The rule did not need fancy language. Elena helped me write it. Mason suggested the reporting process. The legal team made it formal without making it bloodless. When I announced it at the staff meeting, no one clapped. That would have made it feel like theater. Instead, people exhaled. Sometimes leadership is not a speech that inspires everyone. Sometimes it is a policy that lets people sleep better before their next shift. After the meeting, a young server named Tasha waited by the coffee station. She had been working the night Vivian snapped her fingers, though I had not known her name then. "I almost quit that week," she said. "Why didn't you?" She glanced toward Elena, then Mason, then the lobby beyond the staff door. "Because you came downstairs?" I carried that sentence with me for the rest of the day, not because it made me feel heroic, because it reminded me that silence is never neutral when someone else is being made small. A year later, I found my grandmother's letter again while cleaning out an old filing cabinet. The paper had softened at the folds. The ink had faded slightly. But the sentence at the bottom remained clear. Power is not the room going silent when you enter. Power is knowing you can leave any room that asks you to become less than yourself. I framed that line and hung it in my office, not where visitors could see it, but where I could. Sometimes, late at night, I still walk through the downtown lobby after the last event has ended. The chandeliers dim, the staff finish their checklists, the city glows through the glass doors. And I think about that first dinner table, the laughter, the napkin under my hands, the woman I was when I believed silence was the price of being loved. I do not hate her. She survived long enough to become me. And me? I became the woman who no longer waits for cruel people to recognize her before she recognizes herself. That is the ending Daniel never understood. He thought the story was about him losing a wife. It was never about that. It was about a woman inheriting a hotel, finding her voice, and learning that the best revenge is not destroying the table where they laughed at you. It is buying the building, opening the doors, and deciding who deserves a seat.